My neighbours, the Martins farm at Tickford Park Farm, just 3 fields away. And the hedge you can see at the end of this field marks the eastern boundary of what will be Milton Keynes East. It stretches from here, well, from the bypass, which is just behind us, down to beyond the hotel. You can then see trees and some cars, and it goes 2 fields beyond that, down the motorway. Yep, nearly 1,000 acres. We'll be standing looking at what will be the main hub of Milton Keynes East. It's going to be built just down here just in this 5 or 6 acres from here will be the main building, because the main road coming over the motorway will come in just to the left of that white van going down the road, and come into here. This will be the centre of MK East, if you look at the plans. Yeah. And the houses will start there against the bypass. My father first moved here just to Hermitage Farm, where we're sitting now, which was a 250-acre farm, probably quite a typical size for farms in North Bucks in those days. And later, in 1956, the estate bought the neighbouring farm, which is called Weaponer Farm, which is down against Newport Pagnell and borders Newport Pagnell, and that was another 250 acres. So the farm was nearly 500 acres then. My father came from Suffolk. Suffolk is largely arable county. It's drier, a bit drier over in the east there, and actually that farm was light land. So basically, it had a dairy herd over on the family farm in Suffolk and grew arable crops. When my father came to this farm here, Hermitage Farm was all grass. He came over, he ploughed up some of the land to grow wheat and barley on, and then we had chickens here in one of the yards. We then had pigs as well, so it was very much a mixed farm. However, even at that time, the M1 was in the wings waiting to be built, so that was being constructed it was opened in 1959, so I can remember when I was a tiny little boy seeing these big earth movers going to and fro, and I used to emulate them in my sandpit, playing with my toys. 1959 it opened. There's pictures of it there with no crash barrier in the middle, no trees alongside, hardly any cars on it. My neighbour, Gerald Williams, he used to walk across the motorway rather than go over the bridge on Broughton Grounds Lane because it was easier, even with his dog. Cut off 3 fields down against the river, so to get to those we had to then come out of the farm here and go over the motorway roundabout to get down to those fields. And we used to drive the cattle over there to get to the grazing fields in the summer. In fact, we used to drive them down more or less to the cattle buildings near Newport. Until about 1977, and there was 6 people worked on the farm up until the mid-1970s. So we had enough men to herd the cattle, but it did make life a bit more difficult on the farm, obviously. What was a simple farm within one boundary, within what we call a ring fence, suddenly you had to negotiate this road, and although the road was not that busy, there was still a lot more traffic than there had been as soon as you went in. I mean, let's face it, North Bucks was a fairly quiet, you might even call it backwater in those days. We're now at our last harvest here at the farm, because with the approach of Milton Keynes East, we're giving up the tenancy on this farm. It's going to become underneath a industrial park here, because as with many junctions on the motorway, that's where the industrial warehouses are, and this junction is going to be no different.
The expansion plans have been mooted for quite a long time, so obviously we were aware of what might happen. When we were actually told this was our final harvest, obviously we were quite cross. Well, I was quite cross. But on a tenanted farm, you don't have any control over what you're doing. So we were sold, and we had to accept that and move on, really.
It is sad. I suppose I've reached the age of 65, so that's often a retirement age in industry. And so, although it is sad, it's probably time that I sort of looked on. My son has seen the approaching expansion of Milton Keynes and never felt it was really going to be a long-term career for him, because the farm would shrink and disappear, and that's not something you want. If we lived 5 miles away, then he probably would have said, yes, I'd like to do farming as well. And he might have wanted to continue, in which case I could have transferred over to him, taken a back seat, and not actually left the farm, as it were, in the same way. And that's how succession happens. But not here. This farm is disappearing.
When they were talking about the developments for the last 8 or 10 years, this farmhouse and our farmyard and our hill were not included in it.
No.
So it wasn't until last summer when the landlord came round and told us that actually we knew that the house was going. So that's why I was particularly cross, because we actually had no thought of that, did we? Yeah. Until then. The farmhouse and the bit that you see round here had not been sold to the developers. And so right at the last moment, obviously the developers said, well, listen, this is a valuable site, I guess. And so they sort of pulled that from under our feet, really.
In any development, the uplift in value from agricultural value of, say, £10,000 an acre to development value, which I don't know how high it can go, but obviously the bigger the development, probably the less per acre, but it's still a multiplier of more than 10 times. That's very difficult for anybody to resist.
And the estate has chosen to take the money. Yeah. So, and it's left quite a few farmers in the village not happy.
We're here on the field called Westmead. It's low-lying. It's been grass most years, ever since whenever. It was ploughed up briefly for arable farming in the 1980s and 90s, but it does flood, so it's unreliable for arable cropping. We make silage off it normally, but this year we're making hay. We would hope to have made the hay here by now, but we've had to wait because of the bad weather for about 3 weeks. Normally in past years we would have cut silage off this and then probably brought some cattle in when the grass stopped growing. Often we get a drought in June and July, which we haven't got this year, and so the grass stops growing on the other fields and we need to bring some cattle in here. So we either make hay on part or all of it, depending on how much grass is growing in that season. And then about this time of year, then we do bring some cows and calves down here. When my father came here, and when I can first remember in the 1960s, when we had about the 450 acres, but we had pigs, we had cattle, there was about 2,000 chickens on the farm. So we did have my father and up to 4 or 5 other people working on the farm. The pigs went in 1977, so then 2 members of staff went and the farm became largely arable. Now there's myself and full-time employee Steve Walton, who's been here since 1985. So the farm of the 450 acres when I moved here, we're now farming effectively about 550 acres and doing some contracting for a couple of other farmers at the same time. In theory I should be able to do it all myself, but I'm not that capable. I need somebody with me to help out to do it. Yeah, and that's where we are now. So there'll be 2 of us leaving the farm when it eventually turns into Milton Keynes East.
My house is literally just there, the one on the left. So yeah, that's all been demolished. They're not saving any of the houses or farm buildings. The whole lot, clear site. So yeah, we've lived there for the last 37 years. Sad to see the house is going to go, and sort of when you've got all the memories of bringing the kids up and playing around the farm. Yeah, it'll be a sad day when we have to go.
Today we're doing an annual TB test for This has to be done every year to prevent the spread of bovine TB across the country. It is active in Oxfordshire, which is the neighbouring county, so we're what's called an edge area county, and you have to do the tests, so you keep an eye on how it's spreading in the population of cattle.
We had around 30 suckler cows, so we'd put them to the bull. They'd have a calf every year, and that would give us hopefully around 30 calves to fatten, and we'd take sort of 18 months, 2 years to fatten them from the calf to ready to go to abattoir. So if we got sort of 30 cows, 30 lot of year-old ones, and you'd still probably have quite a few of the fatteners as well from the year before that. So we could have up to 70 or 80 cattle on the farm at certain times of the year.
For our beef cows, we choose a continental cow, a continental breed, a Simmental, as the mother mostly. It's a cross on another breed because we had some Charolais cows, which are the white ones with pink noses and pink around the eyes. Not albinos, but they're just white originally. And then we had a Simmental bull, so instead of being Charolais and white, they become Simmentals and orange and stripy more. In my father's time, the breeds were traditional British breeds more. The Hereford, and now coincidentally we had a Hereford bull, and all these calves here now are by a Hereford bull, so they tend to come out red and white. There is that animal was born in March, so it's about 3 months old. Probably belongs to that cow there, I think. I'm not good at identifying each calf that belongs to each cow, but I get a rough idea. And then actually these three here, it's coincidence. It's just coincidence that they happen to be standing that side of the fence. They're actually last year's calves, which we grow on, and then they will be sold fat normally in the autumn at about 20 months of old. These ones we should be selling this autumn, and they'll only be about 15 months old, 15 to 18 months old then, because we're not planning to keep any cattle through the winter because we're finishing. I'm from a family of 4 children. And I've got 2 brothers. I've got an elder brother and an elder sister and a younger brother. They all live in Suffolk on what was the family farm. I moved here by myself when I returned from college and returned from farming over in the farm in Suffolk. I swapped with my dad in 1981. He moved to Suffolk to retire, sort of. No farmer ever properly retires, as you know. And I came here with my wife Elizabeth. We hadn't got any children then. The farm was largely arable, and I stuck to the arable farming system. We kept a few beef cattle because we had been fattening calves that had come from the farm in Suffolk. Bull calves from the dairy herd. We used to bring them over here, we'd rear them and we'd fatten them up and sell them, and so that was the beef system we had here. I changed over to having what we call beef cows. So that slight change we made with the beef became restricted to the fields that we couldn't plough. We ploughed up all the land that was suitable to plough. We did some extra drainage of fields. So we concentrated on the arable side. The beef was a bit of a sideline. Most of the work with beef cattle is in the winter, feeding, bedding, and so we kept those in the buildings we had. When my dad came here, the field sizes were much smaller than they are now. The average field size was probably about 10 acres, which is 4 hectares. And they had hedges all around all these fields, and the predominant trees were hedgerow elms, and there were some oak trees. But when my father came here, as machinery started, and the machinery started to get bigger through the 1950s, and with drainage grants were available, so he actually did pull quite a few hedges out, which was done all through the 1950s and 1960s to make the fields bigger, easier to operate. By the late 1980s, farming was actually going through a bit of a depressed period, and we could see Milton Keynes was developing, and so we looked around to what you might call diversifying to do other things. So we had a couple of paddocks where people would have a horse to do-it-yourself livery on. We started this bed and breakfast enterprise.
We did know of other people in Milton Keynes that were doing bed and breakfast in their houses. We knew there was a big demand for it. We knew the sort of thing that people would want to have. B&B
has worked very well because we're right on the edge of Milton Keynes, but we're in a rural location. So quite a few people enjoy being able to come here and get away from the hubbub of the city in a more relaxed and quiet environment.
It was quite a tie, to be honest with you, the accommodation, because we did offer it as a bed and breakfast, sort of semi-hotel type thing. So certainly to start with, we had to be here at 5 o'clock. We'd got 3 young children, so it was a matter of coming back and seeing the guests in and things like that. But it was quite a tie, and after a little while, we did get some help coming in to take over from us, so we could go on holiday a couple of times a year. Without the growth at Milton Keynes, we probably wouldn't have started it in the first place, to be honest. It was Milton Keynes on our doorstep that encouraged us to do it, really.
We also started doing pick your own strawberries around that time as well. We had a few acres of those for several years until 1997. But the B&B was the main diversification. Yeah, so this is a field of oilseed rape. It was planted last August and it's grown through until now. It's soon be ready to be harvested. Oilseed rape is the oil, vegetable oil. A lot of your cooking oil will be oilseed rape oil. It's also what we call a break crop. Because it's a brassica plant as opposed to a cereal plant, you don't get cross diseases between them in the same way as you don't get diseases normally between different animal species. It's the first crop that comes to harvest, so it suits us to spread our harvest out rather than having a mad panic to try and do everything in about 3 weeks. It is a newer crop. This we only started growing in the 1970s. I think in 1977 was the first year we grew it here. It was a crop that was first grown in the country in this general area. Some farmers started doing it in the 1960s, but my father didn't grow it until the mid-1970s. And ever since then it's been a staple break crop and has been a good crop to grow. Through the sieves of the cleaner, and also it's got a fan that blows the light stuff out, which goes in a trailer there, so the cleaner seed comes here and up into the grain bin. Sample bags. Machinery on farms has changed dramatically. Up until the end of the Second World War, there were still quite a few horses on farms, but certainly when my father came here in 1952, he bought everything mechanised. He'd never had any draft horses, and the machinery was much smaller then. Farms were small, and machinery was all small, in the same way that lorries were small in the 1940s and the 1950s, and now they're huge, great articulated lorries. The same has happened to agricultural machinery. The tractor, which was not much bigger than what you'd see in people's gardens these days, has now grown to the biggest tractors that are as large as a lorry and can do the work that 8 or 9 tractors would have been able to do in the 1940s. And the same with the combine harvester. The combine harvester that we would have had here in the 1950s would have had a cutter bar about 2 metres wide, and now our combine, which is not the biggest by any means, has a cutter bar that's 6.6 metres wide, and the widest combines you can get are now 12.3 metres wide. They have a very big trailer and they're tow behind. You have to more or less take them apart when you move between fields or between blocks of land. But that's the multiplication in size of machinery. The combine probably shows it the best. This is winter wheat here, planted in the middle of October last year, before the ground got too wet in that horrible wet October we had. It's a variety called Crusoe, which I like very much because it's a nice green colour. It's a very dark green variety. Quite a lot of wheat varieties are a sort of blue-green and don't look quite so healthy, for want of a better word. But this planted and grew very well. I wish all our fields of wheat looked like this. It's even, it has got some weeds in it, but the plants have grown and filled pretty much between the rows, so there should be a good yield here. It's more or less at what we call the cheesy ripe stage, so it's nowhere near fit to combine, but in about 3 or 4 weeks' time, this will be very close to being combining. And at that point, I take a sample of grains, I rub them out of the ear, and I take them back to my moisture meter, and I look and see how dry it is. And if it's about 16%, according to my moisture meter, then I'll say, well, that's fit to combine. If I'm too lazy to do that and it looks fit, and I get a piece in my mouth and I chew it, and obviously you tend to calibrate your teeth to the hardness of the grain, because you see what your moisture meter says, and you can tell, oh, that's crunchy like that. So you get approximately a good idea just by chewing it. Well, this field actually runs down to what will be the boundary of Milton Keynes East. It's about 800 metres down the field, and it's a 11 hectare field, which is 32 acres in imperial measurement. We combine at about 5 acres an hour or 2 hectares an hour. So we would combine both these fields either side in a day, fairly comfortably. In 1952, it would have taken my father 4 times as long to combine this area, and there would only have been half as much grain off it. We first learnt about the Eastern expansion, I suppose, about 2012, when we gathered that Berkeley Homes were taking out an option with the estate. At that time, it was on the land the other north of the Moulsoe Road, between the Moulsoe Road and the Newport Pagnell bypass, and that was basically to build industrial warehouses. One of the problems with building houses this side of the motorway would be, how would people get into Milton Keynes? Junction 14 has been clogged for years. So somebody somewhere came up with the great wheeze when the government announced a thing called the Housing Infrastructure Fund, that if Milton Keynes got enough money for a bridge, then that would unlock the possibility of building east of the M1. Within Milton Keynes, there is a feeling that Milton Keynes is such a great place, we should double it in size. A lot of people, I think, haven't quite thought it through, because doubling in size won't necessarily keep all the things that are good about Milton Keynes. Some may get slightly diluted or lost in that change.
My way of looking at this is, I think Berkeley Homes will do a fantastic job of it, and I think if it's anybody building on the land, I think Berkeley Homes, because of the reputation they have, the developments they seem to achieve, and they have been really hands-on, involving people from the village for comments and taking on board what they've said. And I think actually they will do a nice job of it. I think Moulsoe community will be much worse off without, I say us, I mean Nigel really. He's on the parish council, he's on the PCC, he's on the Moulsoe Hall Committee Association, gets involved with everything that's going on in the village. And he's been here a long time, so his knowledge and experience of what goes on in the village is absolutely, essential to the running of the village. I think the identity of Moulsoe will go, because our lovely bund with the horses on will go, and to me that's an entrance to the village, which will now be flattened and become a warehouse type development. And so I think Moulsoe Village will be a massive loser.
I think it's all very short-sighted. I think they will look back in, I don't know how many years it will be, how many tens of years. The population of Britain will be, God knows what it will be at that point, and you'll be looking at all this ground you're covered with houses, and people are going to be thinking, we shouldn't have done that because we can't get that back. That's gone forever.
I was talking to a friend of mine earlier on today, and telling her what was going to go on here, and the fact that the farm was going under houses and this bit was going under warehouses. And she said, but you grow grain for Warburtons, don't you? And I said, yes, we have. Yes, we grow grain for Warburtons. She said, well, where's our wheat going to come from then? And I do worry that so many of the great fields of wheat-producing land in England and the United Kingdom is going under warehouses and houses. And it's not really until we've got a hungry nation, people will be looking back and thinking, why didn't we put some of those on brownfield sites and carry on growing what we need to have to keep our food going? Because we can't guarantee food to be imported forever. We're beholden to the rest of the world for gas, and that's not going too well at the moment. And you just wonder what the consequence for food's going to be.
can't quite believe it'll be the last time, in a way, because you don't believe anything ever quite stops. You always think, well, you'll find a side way to do it, but nothing lasts forever, sadly.
£380, 400 on bid, 420, 420, 420, 420 pound on bid, 420, 420, 440, 440, 460, 460 bid, 460, 460 left-handed here, at 460 pound bid, 460 bid, 460 nuts, 480, 480, 500, 500 pound bid, 5, 500 bid, 500 pound bid, 5. 500 a bid, 500 pound, and I sell left-handed here at 500 pound. Anybody else now? And away then at 500 pound. 10 on bid, 10 pound on bid, 10 on bid, 10 pound on bid, 10 on bid, 10 pound, 50 bid, 50, 50, 10, 20.
What will I miss when I leave farming actively? I think there's always a great satisfaction in, I've always enjoyed growing a good crop. If you can plant it in good conditions and you can control the diseases and you put the right fertiliser on, and then when it comes to harvest, when the combine is going up and down the field, seeing a good crop come into the front of the combine is very satisfying. The greying comes into the tank. That's really a great time. That period in May where everything can grow very fast and crops that maybe didn't look too good often can improve quite a lot. These are the things that are good. And with cattle, I think, when the calves are born, the small calves, it's satisfying to have a good calving. And when we're haymaking, when you can get it right and make a good crop, producing anything that you feel is good is a great feeling of, it's a feeling of achievement.